Hey everybody, welcome to the Taco Tuesday podcast. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Jake.
And we just wanted to remind you that we are now under the umbrella of the Questionable Endeavors Network. Basically what that means is that we are in a class with some other great podcasts, including the Rundown podcast, the Raw Attitude podcast, the New Blood Rising podcast, the Shadow Vein podcast, the Slasher Sanitarium podcast, Pwn Stars, the Reanimator podcast, Tuning Japanese, Words of Geekdom, and even the Questionable Endeavors podcast. If you go to questendnetwork.com, you can check out a bunch of streamed video games, some streamed podcasts. You can even find a link to their Discord channel. You can even follow Questionable Endeavors Network on Facebook and Twitter at questendnetwork.com.
Hello everyone, this is Jake.
And this is Brandon.
And today we've decided that we are going to talk about the metoo campaign, the hashtag that was put on Facebook. Somebody did this on Facebook to bring awareness to sexual assault, rape, that sort of sexual harassment and that sort of stuff. And we both thought that it was important enough. I can't talk today, but we thought that it was important enough that we should talk about it because I don't know about Brandon, but I know that on my feed it was like every other post was a Me Too.
Yeah, it's like every other is a Me Too post or something to that effect.
Right, and that's not okay. I mean, I think the issue that we both thought about when we talked about recording was that we see statistics all the time, and we hear, the big profile cases, the Stanford rapist, like comes to mind automatically. And we know everybody, unfortunately, knows people that have been either raped or sexually assaulted. And
it's just so scary in the fact that it's so frequent.
Right. And we just never talk about it. We never talk about what happens and why it happens and what we can do to stop it. I mean, it seems to me like we talk about numbers and statistics and we bring those things forward and then we never do anything with them. Yeah. And so earlier today we reached out on our Facebook page and we asked people to, if they wanted to send us their story and we would read it or talk about it on the podcast today. So we made there's an anonymous app that you can use, and we made a page for our podcast, and we got one story.
We got a couple messages, and we got 3 messages total. 2 of them were less of what we were looking for, I guess is the way to. I don't want to outwardly say trolls because they're not exactly like giving us a hard time.
No, but they just said hi. They weren't actually stories, which is what we asked for.
Yeah.
But there was one that Brandon's going to read, which is interesting, I guess, to me.
Yeah, to say the least. This was the one actual message that we received through the Sarah Ha app. It says, "Personally, I feel like this subject is too sensitive to be handled by 2 males. Especially being comedians, I'm afraid that you might try to make the entire hashtag #MeToo campaign a big joke. So I don't think you guys will be getting any messages on here. Stick to telling scary stories or telling fart jokes. Leave the feminist issues to us." And by us, I'm assuming that this person that sent it in was a female.
It was either a woman or they were referring to people who aren't comedians, which I want to talk about that. But the first thing I want to say is that comedians we do tell jokes.
Right.
This episode, we will not tell any jokes.
And a lot of people might actually, I guess, be rubbed the wrong way about it, is the only other way I can describe it. Just in the fact that we're comedians,
right?
And, well, our thing is joking around, trying to make things funny, and that kind of thing. But a lot of people forget that
that we're real people, that we have feelings.
We're real people, we have feelings, but at the same time, comedians nowadays, more so, I think, than ever before, are turning real life situations and putting like a humorous spin on them, but still, a lot of times, bringing shit to light before anybody else is.
Right. And I think comedians tackle hard issues. I mean, if you look at, The Daily Show, Colbert, I mean, a lot of those shows, they're humorous in nature, but they tackle serious issues.
Absolutely.
I've seen Jon Stewart cry so many times.
Right.
And so I think, I don't really personally care what an anonymous person says about what Brandon and I are going to do on our podcast, but I will, for anybody who might be listening, we only have the best of intentions, because at the end of the day, we are both men that are sick of hearing about stuff like this, because it doesn't need to happen,
And we don't want to put this air out there that Jake and myself have never done anything that could be looked at as questionable. Like, we have our faults, but at the same time, we want to help bring to light this serious issue that a lot of people still overlook and don't take very seriously.
Right. And it is a serious issue. So, without further ado, we'll just talk about it, I guess, because for one, I identify as a feminist. I believe in equality. I think Brandon probably would say the same. But,
sure,
we are going to take this thing seriously, and I do think that the other thing is that what I am is I'm a person and I'm a human being, and second of all, I'm a comedian, right? So to say like, oh, you can't talk about this because you're a comedian, well, I can, because I personally, and this is like a weird, I've never said this out loud, but I've been sexually assaulted, and and like Brandon said, I've done some questionable things that may be perceived ill, and I don't take that lightly. I do want to do my best to make the world better, and I think that having a conversation is a great way to do that, So I think we can move on from the Saraha thing. Unfortunately, we didn't get any serious stories.
That was the only message that we received that was substantial.
Right. But I have a friend who sent me a message about her experience. So obviously I'm not going to say any names, and nobody would know who she is anyways. But so I will just tell you, I'm going to paraphrase, because it was a very long story. But the story, and it starts out like a lot of these stories do, is that she was visiting a friend, somebody that she knew. And honestly, she had met him for the first time, but she had known this person for years. Talked to him, probably on an almost daily basis. And she was meeting him for the first time, and she had like one shot of whiskey and one beer, and then they went to a different bar, and she got handed another beer, and she said, "Oh, I'm not really a big drinker, and I don't want to drink this." And the guy said, "Oh, well, it's rude." In Iceland, she traveled to Iceland for vacation and met this guy who also happened to be living there that she already knew. And he said, well, it's rude in Iceland to not drink a beer when somebody buys you a beer. So she had a few more drinks, and then she finally put her foot down and was like, look, I know that it may be rude, but I don't want it. And it was something like 10 or 15 minutes later that she started feeling kind of woozy and sick. And this guy basically forced himself onto her and, in the middle of a bar did some obscene things with other people around. And she luckily was able to get out of that situation because he was saying stuff like, "You're going home with me, you want me," and this stuff, when she was clearly saying that she didn't.
Yeah.
And so she was able to get away from her attacker and get back to her hostel and go to a hospital because she wanted to find out what drugs were in her system. And unfortunately, at the hospital, she was going to have to pay full price for these tests because she wasn't a citizen and she didn't have the money. So she ended up going home, sleeping for like 2 days, not really getting to be on the vacation that she was supposed to be on because somebody, drugged her.
Decided to take
advantage of her. And the worst part about it is I was talking to her. I mean, that part is horrific in itself. And I'm not trying to downplay it, but this thing that I see a lot and is sad to me is that she partially blames herself for it, for being in that situation. Yeah. And I understand that you have to be cautious, but it's sad that you can't trust people who you think are your friends. That, even with your friends, you have to be on guard because somebody may try to do something malicious to you. And I don't think that it's her fault,
Absolutely not, yeah.
And so, I thank her for sharing her story because statistics don't tell stories the way actual experience does, right?
Right. They're just numbers on paper and graphs.
Right. And when you see a statistics that say, whatever, and I don't know the actual statistics, but, 4 in 6 women will be raped or something, you think, oh, that's horrible, but there's no faces to numbers,
Absolutely.
My friend has a face and she has an experience and is so brave for sharing that because, anytime you share that, you relive that experience.
Right.
It's one of those things that it's almost like beyond words because I have so much going on in my head and none of it takes away that experience from her. None of it really makes it better. But I think, one of my goals in talking about this, hopefully, is that we start a conversation and we get people thinking about how they treat other human beings,
Yeah, absolutely. It's starting a healthy dialogue. Right. I'm hoping that kind of opens a door for other people that still kind of waft this issue to the side and think, it doesn't really pertain to me. I've never, or the people that, like myself, a lot of the times when if they're drunk, they're going to say stupid shit. Mm-hmm. That is going to happen. If you're drunk, you're going to say stupid shit. It's just, it should say that on the side of the beer bottle.
Right.
But it's those instances where people make the excuse, oh, well, I've at least I've never raped anybody, so it's not as bad,
right?
Or try and hide the guilt with that kind of excuse, basically. It's difficult to put into words, but right. I'm embarrassed to say that I'm part of that group. I'm part of the group of males that has been in a group of drunken guys, and you see a hot girl or an attractive girl at the bar, or even just walking out of the street, and you drive past them, and you're in the car, you're drunk with your guy friends, and everybody starts shouting out the window, "Show me your tits!"
Right.
That's in the heat of the moment. You and your buddies are thinking, "Oh, that's hilarious. We're the most clever guys in the world. She'd definitely want to hang out with us because we're so funny."
Yeah.
But meanwhile, that girl just had